All right, good afternoon, everybody.
How's everyone doing? All right.
We're excited. Well, I'm excited at least. Wine and cheese. And a beautiful sunshiny day. What's better than that?
And we're a little bit further away from the camera, and we didn't do a sound check to start off with. So if somebody could give us a little sound check, that would be great.
Make sure we sound good. We got to get in here, get watching so I can answer any questions.
All right.
How do I do that?
I think everyone's getting in here. Want to get... Hey, Vienna, how's this? If we talk like that, is that volume better? All right. We're all filing in here. So, we had to go outside because it's beautiful out, and we've been cooped up inside for too long. So we hope that you all are outside as well. And as everyone's kind of getting logged in and getting connected here, we obviously want to welcome you all. If I haven't met you before, I'm Jeremy, my colleague Lacey here as well. 4 beautiful wines here today, 2 whites, 2 reds. And if you don't have your cheese and crackers out, you get them out. And for those who got the date night package, if you don't have bubbly in your hand with some of those potato chips, get them out right now. But this is one that we love doing wine and cheese experiences out here, or just wine and food experiences in general. I mean, I think when we kind of think about, at least for me, my favorite wine experiences, they are those moments and times, not where I just have a great bottle of wine, but when I also have it with food, and I have it with sort of my loved ones around, people who I'm having a great experience with. And I think food and wine have this unique ability to kind of connect with us on such an emotional level, that our best experiences generally are those that sort of create the most sort of profound emotions. And, I think, when the guide for today, for making sure we got the wines paired with the right cheeses, this has been a Bible for us out here. The book is called What to Drink with What You Eat, and the cheese section in it is absolutely phenomenal. If you ever want to be at home and have a good reference for what wine or beverage you should be drinking, this book is amazing. And it's not just comprehensive on wine, it's also comprehensive on beer, spirits, cocktails, things like that, even non-alcoholic drinks. It's super amazing on. But when you get a food and wine experience, great, take a great piece of food, in this case it's going to be cheese, you put it with a great wine, 1 + 1 will equal 3, right? Or as your dad always says, as Mike always says out here, when you kind of get these sort of things together, you get this whole symphony that can really sort of sing together out here when you get good food and wine. So that's what we're going to do today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So this afternoon, we're really just looking forward to trying some different wines with you all, with these different cheeses, and really having a conversation about what makes a great pairing. I mean, really, at the end of the day, if you have good wine and you have good food, chances are it's going to be pretty tasty. But at the same time, it's always great to use a little bit. There are some different kind of tricks to it, and some different theories behind pairing wine with different foods. So we'll definitely get into that. But I think we should just go ahead and get started.
Yeah, I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
I mean, I think the cool thing is, just real quick, a lot of us kind of have at least a crude idea. And just real quick, Carolyn, thank you for tuning in. Robin, Glennis, Lori, it's good to see you. Kate, we have in here. Jennifer, Donna, just a whole bunch of you. Linda's in here too, and Lori. Thank you all so much. And Courtney, we got Courtney in here. Courtney, it's really good to have you in. And hey, Sarah. Long time no see. Just been a couple days here. Not the Sarah who queued us up here. But look, we generally know how wine is made, at least most of us, right? You take these grapes, yeast converts to alcohol and CO2, and we get this sort of product that is wholly different and complex. It's gone through this radical transformation, taking something very similar. Cheese is very similar to that. It's very analogous, where we essentially are going to take one single raw ingredient, by and large, in this case milk, right? There's some microbiological things that are going to happen in terms of organisms, time, and oxygen are all going to impact this. And the source of the milk, right? The environment in which that milk was produced, the animal from which it produced, all of that stuff will impact its flavor. And there's a tremendous amount of complexity, not only on just the end product, but in the world of cheese. You know, we've done a couple really amazing wine and cheese experiences out here where we sort of we've had like the equivalent of a master sommelier for the cheese world. His name's Perry. He does a tremendous job, and chatting with him, it is absolutely mind-blowing when you think about the complexity associated with cheese. Is very, very similar to wine in terms of proper service, proper tasting, even though you think you wouldn't necessarily need that. And I think it's a really fun thing to kind of take what we think to just be cheese, but you really think about, it's kind of like wine's just fermented grape juice. Cheese is really just kind of curdled milk that's been aged.
Yeah, and can go into so many different realms and styles, and that's what I like about these pairings that we put together today, is that we are going to taste I believe everything is cow's milk, but
except for one, which we'll get into, but the very last one, the Beamster XO, and maybe that's a good place to start too, is like, because we had the little label on your boxes. Okay, so we're going to get our bearings straight before we get too excited on drinking and eating. So I'm not sure if you all can see this here. Okay, but I'm going to point this out here. This cheese right here, so if you had a piece of cheese that was sort of vacuum sealed in a bag, that was the Loxley Farmstead Camembert. Okay, the cheese right next to that, and that's going to be paired with the Wild Boar Riesling, and we're going to kind of line item through each of these. The next one that was kind of obviously a white cheese, kind of crumbly or crystalline sort of texture if you sort of break it or cut it, that is going to be the Prairie View Cheddar by Milton Creamery. The very last cheese, this golden cheese that kind of looks like an orangish Parmesan, that's the Beamster XO that's going to go with the Petit Verdot. And for cheese number 3, depending on when you ordered, because these were very popular, we had to make a cheese substitution. What Lacey and I have is, again, the Loxley Farmstead Creamery down in Middleburg, but this is going to be their Nottingham Gouda. You may have a cheese that looks like sort of a yellow cheddar that has flecks in it. That's the Cotswold. And that cheese is a double Gloucester that has some cool chives and onions in there and things like that. That cheese is meant to go with the Cabernet Franc. So those are the bearings. The order in which we're going to taste is we're going to taste the Riesling with the Camembert. We're going to taste the Estate Sauvignon Blanc with the Prairie View Cheddar. We're going to taste the Cabernet Franc with either your Nottingham Gouda or your double Gloucester Cotswold. And then the Petit Verdot lastly is going to go with that Beamster. And then you probably have a couple condiments in there as well. Chef has this really amazing sort of Cajun mustard thing that's amazing. You have some sort of fruit compote that's presumably raspberry. You may have blackberry, again, depending on when you ordered. We have dried figs, and we have our house-made pickles as well. So that's the foundation. If you have questions about that, let me know. But yeah, we'll just kind of dive in from here.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and really this is going to be fairly free-form, so feel free to taste along the way. And I always think it's fun, you know, we paired these things specifically, but as we're going along, you've got a pretty good little chunk of cheese there, so feel free to try, you know, a little of each with all of them and see how these different flavors interact and whatnot as we go along.
All right, I'm gonna get confused here, so I'm gonna flip mine around here.
Oh, that's probably smart.
So, and what's cool too is that it's important to understand. Okay, when we start talking, you're gonna hear Lacey and I kind of talk about these rules of how you pair cheese and wine and food and wine, and you know, ask us any questions that aren't related to cheese too, and just food and wine pairing. But it's important to understand that wine and cheese really kind of go pretty well with one another. In general, when you pair wine with food, one of the reasons why wine is so great is because the acidity helps cut through the fat and rich texture of cheese. If it's a saltier cheese, that acid helps come through there. The berry fruit flavors are kind of like what this berry compote is going to add to the table. But it's going to be fun to kind of play around with these a little bit, right? Again, if we've gotten the pairing right, generally the two are going to really seamlessly integrate, you know, but by and large, cheese and wine is going to go pretty well. The cool thing about this very first cheese, so let's dive into this one here. This first cheese is from the Loxley Farmstead. which is produced at the Ag District of Chrysalis, which is down here in Middleburg. So we really wanted the first cheese to be something local here. They do a tremendous job. This creamery that they've started is in its relatively youthful stages, but the quality of the cheeses is amazing. And Camembert, as Lacey said, this is going to be a cheese. It's a younger cheese. It's entirely based on cow's milk. And when we say Camembert, right, it's kind of in the Camembert style. It is similar to Brie in certain ways. It's going to have this nice, soft, creamy texture. This is a style of cheese that is from the actual village of Camembert that dates back to like the first time they sort of were produced. This was back in the 1700s. And obviously that style has sort of emerged more broadly. So again, when you start thinking about these analogies of wine, right, some of the wines we do out here are done in the Bordeaux style, right, not unlike the way that Camembert, this Camembert here produced down in Middleburg, is made in the style of cheese from Camembert in the northern part of France. And so it's a soft cheese. Generally speaking, a Camembert, while similar to a Brie, is going to be more intense. You're going to get maybe some funkier aromas here, but this cheese is going to go beautifully really with the Riesling here, which is going to have some just beautiful acidity here to really cleanse the palate in between the sort of like velvety, silky texture of this cheese. And also the Blanc de Blanc, if you got that, or if you got the Blanc de Noir, dynamite with the cheese of this style.
Absolutely. Because that's, when we're talking about pairings, there's really two ways to think about it. Is for this pairing in particular, we have this really creamy, rich, lovely, really depth of flavor to that. And then the Riesling has this beautiful bright acidity that kind of cuts through that creaminess and really complements it. Whereas you could have like a really rich Chardonnay would pair beautifully with this Brie, but it would be a totally different experience because you wouldn't have that same sort of acidity fighting the creaminess. It would be more of just that, the richness would be just bringing everything kind of together in this congruent manner.
That's right.
As well. Yeah.
And I have to give a special shout out to one of my favorite ladies in the entire world, Nina. I am so glad that you are in here right now, and it's been a long time since I've seen you, but I hope you're doing well. So again, ask us any questions along the way. I guess we'd be remiss if we didn't actually talk about this wine. If you don't drink a lot of Riesling or don't really like Riesling, but you've trusted us to taste this wine, we really appreciate that. Riesling in general kind of has gotten a bad rap because of maybe the inexpensive, generally sweet versions that really have traditionally flooded the American market. That has changed substantially over recent years and over the recent decade. And some of my most favorite wines are Riesling-based wines. But there's an incredible amount of dry Riesling that is now produced. Obviously, this varietal is made incredibly famous in Germany, where some of the greatest white wines in the world are produced from this grape varietal. It's generally considered a cool climate grape, which is one of the reasons why we have such precision with the acidity here. This specific wine here, we sourced fruit from the Finger Lakes region of New York. So New York is one of the oldest wine growing regions in America. It's the fourth largest producer in the country as well. And what's really cool is these Finger Lakes are these glacial lakes that have these very deep sort of depths, I guess is the way to put it. So they actually retain sort of a lot of thermal mass. And so, the vineyards here in the Finger Lakes region are actually kind of surrounding those lakes because it is a pretty cool wine growing region, but grape growing is made possible because of the sort of, the extended growing season by the sort of microclimate around these lakes.
Yeah.
So, and don't forget to ask questions if you got cheese questions, wine questions. If you're drinking something other than our wines, definitely ask.
Absolutely.
That was a good cheese.
I'm glad you all are enjoying this pairing. That was very tasty to me. Absolutely. Also, fun fact, I was looking up some different cheese facts before we got into this today and looking up the Loxley Creamery, and so this they actually use some of the grape pumice, which is basically the leftover skins and all of that after pressing off grape juice to become wine there at Chrysalis, and work that into the feed that they that they give their dairy cows. So that's, I think,
That's
is
pretty
a pretty
That's
fun
pretty cool.
thing. So you're having a little bit of like maybe a chrysalis terroir in this camembert here as well.
Debbie, the name of the book is What to Drink with What You Eat. If you didn't get that, just text me and I'll give it to you. But it's by Dornenberg and Page. Amazing book. So without much further ado, I think we'll just keep sliding along here.
Yeah.
One of my favorite cheeses actually is this Prairie View cheddar.
It's so good. Yeah, absolutely. So this, it's a Milton Creamery Prairie Breeze, which is coming from Iowa. And this is, it's a cheddar style. It's going to be a little bit sweeter than many of the cheddars that you'll meet. And it has this amazing, I had to look this one up because it has this amazing texture to it where you'll kind of get these little crystals. It really is this beautiful texture, and so this cheese is aged 9 months, and as part of the aging process, it's calcium crystals that develop within the texture of the cheese. It's just delicious. This is definitely a staff favorite around here.
Yeah, and I think what's so cheddar is kind of a cheese that can go a lot of different ways from a pairing standpoint. In this case, so this cheese could pass over into the red wine territory. And it's one of the reasons why we kind of put it in the number 2 spot here, because as we transition into the reds, even the Cabernet Franc could potentially go pretty well with this. But there's a specific reason why we selected this Sauvignon Blanc to go with it, because this is our 2018 Reserve Sauvignon Blanc that we still have never officially released into the tasting room yet. A few of our estate club members who are into this tasting today have tasted this, have gotten this in one of their shipments before. But we absolutely love this wine. We're really excited later on in the year to get this released into the tasting room officially, as long as we're able to get that opened up here. But remember, we've kind of featured Sauvignon Blanc in almost all of these tastings moving forward because we think it has such promise out here. But the reason why we paired, traditionally, and we talked about it in some of our previous tastings, one of the most classic pairings when it comes to wine and cheese is a Sauvignon Blanc from the Loire Valley in the northern central portion of France, paired with some of the famous goat cheeses that they have there. And goat cheese, whether or not it's fresh goat cheese, maybe aged a little bit, it has a lot of acidity. It's very bright. It's generally a lighter cheese as well. It goes beautifully with those racy, mineral-driven Sauvignon Blanc. But if you remember from those previous tastings, or if you're kind of new to these, the Reserve Sauvignon Blanc is actually modeled off the styles that you would find in Bordeaux, France, where when Lacey's kind of talking about this enhanced texture or sweetness that's kind of here in this cheddar, we selected this wine specifically because this Reserve Sauvignon Blanc does have a more expansive palate. It's a slightly richer Sauvignon Blanc. It has a richer fruit profile as well, but still maintains that acidity. So when you taste this cheddar, I mean, it does kind of have a sharpness to the acidity. It does have a little bit of sweetness as well. But again, it does have a richness and sort of body to it that goes nicely with sort of the more textural driven style that we're doing here with the Reserve. So I think it's a nice pairing. I mean, I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, those are one of my favorite wines and one of my favorite cheeses. So that's definitely going to be a win for me. But hopefully it seems like you all are enjoying that too.
And Rosa, I think that's a good point. And I saw somebody kind of mention this with the Riesling as well. I mean, I think that, so it's important to understand when we think about amazing food and wine pairings, a great sommelier, if you go to their restaurant, the first thing out of their mouth, if you ask them what wine they should have with dinner, the first thing they should ask you is really, what do you typically like? What do you like to drink? Are you looking to experiment and go a little bit outside your comfort zone to kind of figure out what you like and why, and whether or not you're looking to kind of stray outside your comfort zone, or you just kind of want to go with a great classic, but you're not familiar with the selections that they have. And I think that's very important when it comes to food and wine pairing. But for me, some of the most amazing experiences have when I have gone outside my comfort zone, when I've had a wine that I typically don't drink, or that I don't like, but suddenly in the right context with the right food, it is absolutely amazing. And I think that when you think about the greatest food and wine pairings, right, is that both when they say that 1 + 1 = 3 for a great food and wine pairing, the reality is that the wine tastes better because of the food that you're having, and the food tastes better because of the wine that you're having, and it makes you want to eat more. So it's kind of a dangerous combination, but I think that both the Riesling and the Sauvignon Blanc, if you generally aren't drawn to those styles, well, that's kind of a really great test of a great sommelier doing their job at the restaurant, right? And I think that's a really good point.
Certainly, yeah, and absolutely. And then really when it comes to not just pairing cheeses, but really looking towards pairing wines with a meal, that's when you're going to look at like the whole picture. And really, in that case, I mean, I guess you can kind of go either way, where, if you're really set on having this bottle of wine, then you can build your meal around that. But most often what we're doing is deciding what we're going to cook for dinner and then choosing a bottle of wine to go that will complement that. And that's such a fun process, because then you're looking at different herbs and spices and all of the different pieces that bring it all together. Absolutely. And I just wanted to say, oh, I'm glad. Nice to see ya. This is so fun. I love everybody popping in, and it's such a beautiful day to be here at Stone Tower, and kind of an especially weird one, because usually we would have a whole boatload of our friends enjoying the property with us at 4:00 on a Sunday. So it's nice that we at least get to do this and virtually interact with you all and share the property and the wines in this way.
Yeah, for sure. It is sad, but we have officially set the record for the largest tasting we've ever done and the largest virtual tasting as well. So congratulations to all of you all. It's kind of funny, because when you were saying that, I was thinking, wow, we actually have a pretty high attendance on here. And you know what? It's kind of like we're kind of still experiencing that busyness out here. Well, again, don't hesitate to ask a question out here as well. I mean, Lacey and I, when we were trying to figure out where do we even start talking about this stuff today, because when you start talking about food and wine pairings, I mean, this is one great book, but we got a slew of them in here. And if you want to know any other of our sort of favorite, there's a couple other books by Evan Goldstein, Master Sommelier, who's written 2 amazing books, Perfect Pairings and Daring Pairings. If you have any other questions or need book recommendations or anything like that, there's some extraordinarily useful rules associated with food and wine pairings that really kind of allow for you to do just a really great pairing at home. And I think, kind of what you were saying, I mean, the whole goal is to not overcomplicate it. Generally speaking, when you make a great food and wine pairing, you kind of want to pick, or do you want to highlight the wine? Do you want to pick a special bottle of wine and have food that complements that? Or do you have a meal that you are already preparing and you need to figure out what kind of, based on what I have, goes best with that? You generally kind of let one be the star. And I think there's some really good books. So direct message us, call us, email us, whatever you want. We'll talk till we're blue in the face here.
Absolutely.
About it.
One quick reference I would definitely recommend that you can just Google right now, basically, is Wine Folly. It is just super simple what they do, and they even have all these different infographics too of how things go together, and they really break food and wine pairing down to the most basic of basics. And when you start from there, it's really simple to see why certain things would go well together and why other things wouldn't. And I especially, when it comes to really home cooking, which I know a lot of us are doing a whole lot more than we usually would, they have a whole poster, basically, a whole infographic on different herbs and spices, and then what those herbs and spices and garlic and like every kind of ingredient, different wines that pair well with those, which was really helpful for me to see, and really good.
Yeah, and I mean that's actually where I generally go, because I generally have a tendency to be brevity is something that I'm trying to work on in my life, and especially with the way I speak and write and all of that stuff. And that's what I love most about Wine Folly, of this entire complex world of wine and food. Her and her team's ability to kind of create this succinct way of communicating is amazing. And I actually utilized that website as a resource to help with these pairings, as well as talking today. And I think one of the best rules that we can kind of think when you talk about food and wine pairing is you first want to always match weight with weight, meaning if it's a lighter dish, or in this case a lighter, fresher cheese, generally you want a lighter wine. If it's a more intense, bigger, more voluminous sort of cheese or dish, you need a bigger wine. I think that serves as kind of a nice transition point as we go into the reds here. And again, if you're still in the whites, take your time, enjoy them, don't rush. Remember, as we go into sort of the third pairing here, you have one of two cheeses. One of them could be the Cotswold, the double Gloucester, double Gloucester from Gloucestershire, England. It's true. But anyways, so you could have that paired up with the Cabernet Franc, or you may have the Nottingham Gouda from Loxley Farmstead. Okay, and one of the cool things, when you look up kind of wine and cheese pairing, generally some of the best pairings, your go-to pairings, you're actually generally going to kind of want a white wine. You're generally going to kind of want a sparkling wine. Beer is tremendous with cheese as well. You can have really great red wine and cheese pairings. It's generally a smaller world, and you want to focus your world not just on the most intense cheeses, but generally cheeses that have been aged longer. When you make cheese, right, gradually, and as you age it, the flavors will become more intense. They will become more nutty as well, more aromatic, but more specifically, the fat content and the saltiness is going to increase, because what's happening is moisture is going away. As it is drying or aging in a cave or a perfect hermetically sealed room, the idea is that moisture is gradually going to be leaving, intensifying the fat content, intensifying the saltiness, and intensifying the flavors. And that fat content increasing is one of the big reasons why we can transition into red wine territory, because when we kind of think about the chemistry of what happens when we pair wine with food, red wine has what we call tannins. Generally, a bigger red wine has more tannins, and this comes from the grape skins. It can come from new oak. It can come from the stems and seeds of grapes as well. Red wines generally have this in abundance because of the way that we make red wine, leaving the juice in contact with the skins for an extended period of time. Those tannins can sometimes get in the way of younger, fresher cheeses and can actually conflict and create maybe a bad experience. But with the increased fat content, fat and tannin can bind with one another, allowing for a more enjoyable experience here. And it's the same reason for why a big, robust red wine, maybe a Cabernet from Napa Valley or our Hogback Mountain out here, or really any of these two wild boar wines, the reason why they go so well with that, grilled piece of red protein off of the grill is because that piece of protein, if it's a ribeye steak, it has both a high fat content and a high protein content. Tannins bind with both fat and protein, and they kind of can offset one another, allowing for you to kind of move past those sort of more structural elements of both the wine and the cheese and get a really great appreciation for kind of the fruit flavors and earthiness in the wine, as well as maybe the nuttiness and sort of other different crazy aromas going on in the cheese. And that's kind of what sets up these last two wines with these last two cheeses.
Absolutely. And so we've gotten some great questions about kind of what to do with all the different accoutrements with here. So, we have our dried apricots and figs and some house-made pickles and, two different sauces, so a Cajun mustard and then this berry compote. And really, for me, I wonder what your answer would be to this, but I kind of just like to experiment with those little extra bits and pieces and try to find combinations that really I enjoy. So for me, I love to have just a little tiny piece of either the apricot or the fig or, that berry compote to add a little bit of sweetness to, to really making the perfect bite of, have some cheese, cracker, you have that salty, fatty deliciousness, and then a little bit of sweetness to offset that. And then those, go beautifully with the wines. With the mustard and the pickles, those both add a little bit more kind of a more savory characteristic, a more, especially with the mustard, kind of a bit of a more spice. So I prefer that personally with the red wines, but you might like it with the whites. So, it's really, that's like your spice cabinet here, so you can experiment with that a little bit.
Yeah, and again, I think that's a great point. I think it's kind of what it really. Look, every single person who's tuned in right now, over the 100 people who are watching this right now. The reality is that all of us have very different palates. Some of us maybe like wines that have a little bit more sweetness. Some of us like maybe wines with a little bit more tannin. Some of us like wines with more acidity or less acidity, more earthiness, more fruit. I think the idea is though is that most of the time, maybe not the case when we're sort of in, full-on lockdown mode here amid COVID, but the idea is that most of the time when you set out a nice board of cheese and charcuterie and condiments, you have a whole bunch of other people that you're hosting that have different palates, and it kind of allows for you and your guests, most importantly, to kind of find that right combination for their palate. It also is really important in case you're doing this at a time period where it's not socially acceptable for drinking wine, or maybe one of your guests in your household doesn't drink, right? The idea is that the same sort of complementary flavor profile and structural things that you are getting from the wine. So when you're talking about sweetness, when you're talking about acid, when you're talking about these different things, these different condiments can do that. Some people view the pickle as kind of a little palate freshener in between, in the same way that a high acid white or just wine in general can quench your thirst too. And I think most importantly too is that that's it. That's all I got. Because I think these cheeses are really great. So Lacey and I have we'll talk about the Gloucester cheese from England. So that cheese is from England. That creamery is based in England, specifically in Gloucester. And this cheese is in some ways is kind of similar. We don't get to eat it because we sold it all out and we didn't get to save any for ourselves. But what's really cool about this cheese, in some ways, that you kind of want to think about this as a cheddar that has maybe a little bit more intensity, a little bit more nuttiness. There's a Gloucester and then there's a double Gloucester, and this double Gloucester really is in reference to increased aging. Okay, so it's going to age longer, so it's going to be more intense. It's going to be a little bit drier, a little bit more firm. It also boils down to the milk that's used. It's generally a richer milk, whole milk generally as well, sometimes with the full fat cream in there as well. So it's a pretty fatty, big cheese. But what's really cool about this one, the reason why we paired it with the Cabernet Franc, is because what you'll notice, those flecks that are in there, while there may be some crystals, we don't get really to see it, but those are actually some freeze-dried onion as well as chive that's in there. And that sort of lift aromatically that cheese has, we thought would go really nice with generally the lift that Cabernet Franc provides to a wine.
Yeah, and just really delicious savory characteristics that go so beautifully with, this wine that I love with basically, any most savory dishes in general, and really with that cheddar and chive kind of mixture there that's one of my, I guess I keep saying I have all these different favorite cheeses, but that's definitely one of them.
Jake, we do not have any ash rind cheese here. We used to carry a really amazing ash rind cheese. I love them. Vermont Creamery does a couple different really amazing ones. One of them is called Bon Bouche that we used to carry out here. Really amazing. With most ash ripened cheeses, if they're based on goat cheese, go amazing with Sauvignon Blanc. That's kind of one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's a favorite, but unfortunately it's not enough people's favorite, so it's a little hard to keep in stock.
It is.
We ended up eating too much of it, so.
But if you have the Loxley Gouda, so this is their Nottingham, and this cheese we reinserted for some of you since we sold out of the double Gloucester. When I was kind of working with Chef to kind of figure out what cheeses we could use, he came to me and said, "This is a life-changing cheese." It's one of his top 5 cheeses. So he came in this morning and said, "Hey, Jeremy, I want you to retry this and really think about it." Because this Gouda, if you are having it, or if you haven't, we still have some for sale in the marketplace. It's not like most Goudas that I've had where maybe the texture is a little bit softer, creamier, more velvety. Obviously, sometimes you come across smoked Gouda as well, but this one is aged a little bit longer. It's derived from cow's milk, and it's almost got this Parmesan-like sort of saltiness and nuttiness that, again, is just a beautiful cheese. And actually, I think this cheese here would go beautifully with the Petit Verdot as well. When I'm sort of tasting it. And Gouda is a pretty sort of ubiquitous style of cheese, kind of like cheddar, but the actual style itself is it's a Dutch-inspired cheese. That originally the cheese was made in the town of Gouda in sort of southern Holland. And actually, if you were there, you would not pronounce it Gouda, right? You would pronounce it Houda, Houda, like phonetically Howda.
This was my most favorite fun cheese fact of the day that we learned.
Yes, it was a good one.
I love this Howda. Here, I can't do that. That's Gouda. It really has almost like a Parmesan quality to it. It's just like such a dry, lovely texture that goes perfectly with this lighter, dry, it almost mimics the way that the tannins interact.
Yeah.
Delicious. What a treat. And yes, and so, the folks asking about all of these, cheeses that you've gotten, and we actually have a whole slew more of them we have here in the marketplace. So if you're ever coming out, for a curbside pickup to get some wine, just give us a ring. If you need any cheese charcuterie, we have all sorts of delicious things in-house that we would love to send over to your house so you can enjoy some more wine and cheese, and hopefully some more sunny days coming soon.
Couple good questions here. Vienna, the pickles are made here, so we buy the cucumbers and then we'll actually pickle them here, and it's not a quick pickle, it's like a legit pickle. We put it in a brine and then sort of allow the bacteria to sort of naturally convert it. I will talk to chef to see if we can do anything about that. We've had similar people sort of say that about the mustard as well. There are some legality things that we would need to work out in order to sell them. Margie, who made the Gouda, that is the Loxley Farmstead, which is down in Middleburg, and it's actually it's produced at what they call the Ag District of Chrysalis, and so it's Chrysalis's vineyard, sort of, it's related, it's the same ownership and same project, so they kind of have a multifaceted sort of farm that they have going on down there. So both of those, and the cheeses are actually extraordinarily well priced for the quality. We carry several other ones, which leads me to Adrian. You asked if you can get these cheese for carryout purchase. You absolutely can. Virtually all of them should be listed on the website in the store. If you go there, you can give us a call as well. And on our website, you'll actually see that we have a Loxley Farmstead sort of package that is specially priced, where it kind of has I think we carry 4 or 5 of different other cheeses, and it kind of includes all of them. So what a lot of people do are just kind of placing that order, then in the internal notes just say, hey, I'm gonna come pick it up curbside this date and time, and then we just run it out to you. So I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah. So we would love to get more questions about, the world of food and wine pairing beyond cheese. Well, I could talk about cheese for a long time, so more cheese questions are great too. But and then I'm excited, I was about to say, for one of my favorite cheeses, which I have said a few times today, but it's still true. This Beemster has always been just really so delicious to me. It's a Dutch cheese that, so this one ages for 26 months at least. So this is, when you talk about how wine develops over time, we age, our red wines for about that long, nearly, and just the amount of development in terms of the different flavor profile within this cheese is just, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's really good, and what I just was realizing too when you sort of said that and brought up the 26 months aging on that cheese, progressively what you have, if you work through our flight at least, this is true for. If you have the Cotswold, it might not quite be true, but generally speaking, as we go from the Camembert to the cheddar, if you have the Gouda or Howda, and then the Beemster, you're progressively going from a cheese that was aged less to a cheese that was aged more. And just, if you still have some, just go back and kind of re-taste those and kind of notice what happens to the texture or the moisture content of the cheese. And really what's going to be happening is it goes from soft, velvety, kind of juicy almost, to maybe something that is a little bit more crumbly, Parmesan-like. And that's a great sort of flight to kind of display that. The other big difference too here with the with this Beemster is, and maybe you did say this by here, but it's the one cheese that is not, that we have on the flight, that is derived from goat's milk, not cow's milk. It's important to also understand that sheep's milk is a very important cheese, or very important sort of kind of milk that's used for cheese as well. Oh, Amy, blue cheese and the port would be an amazing, amazing pairing.
That's the dream.
Yeah. And that kind of touches on another important element of sort of like one of the great rules is, you know, that generally speaking, some of your, like historically, like if you go to France, right? Like you go to, you know, even when we were in England, I mean, the idea is, I think what I love when I go to a top restaurant in America is when a cheese menu is brought out, a cheese cart is wheeled out at the end of my meal. And to me, that really tops it off. And again, if, you know, when you look at these food and wine pairing books, right, if you were having a multi-course meal, if you were trying to make a great pairing with this dish, and you want to pair a singular wine in that, you need to be thinking about the arc of the overall meal, right? So you don't want to pair a Napa Cabernet Sauvignon with your second course and then roll into a duck-based dish that is paired with Pinot Noir or Red Burgundy, and then go back up and finish off with some sort of fortified wine, whether or not that's port or maybe it's a sweet wine. You really need to think about the arc of the whole meal. And so, Amy, you really got me thinking about this idea of these really intense cheeses, like a blue cheese, a Stilton, something that's really stinky and funky. You generally kind of want to have a sweet wine that pairs with that, because it really helps give a very clean, bright fruit profile to the wine. The sweetness really, those cheeses are generally pretty fatty, or at least very salty as well, and that sweetness really helps here. But where I was going with that is that I absolutely love that as kind of being the finale for me. I'll skip dessert sometimes. So again, if you have a sweet wine, right, you know, if Lacey and I were dining out, right, the idea is that if she was getting dessert and I wanted my cheese, right, the idea is we could still have this sweet wine here that kind of allows for us to both kind of have a great bottle of wine, but then also, you know, sweet wine can kind of go both ways
bridge
with that.
The two separate things. And that kind of goes back to this fundamental idea of having things that either complement each other. So, you know, the sweet wine with the cheese is going to be that, you know, these two different things that come together to be delicious. And then a sweet wine with a dessert, you know, fundamentally much more similar, but still come together to be this delicious pairing. So, you know, just kind of a different take on it. But, sounds great. A little important right now, you know?
We thought about throwing that in there. We didn't have enough though. Was kind of the issue. Yeah. Because we need the next round of bottling to get it.
But we still have some of that available on the website. So yeah, when your days are feeling a little extra long, a little important at the end of it, it's not the worst thing in the world, that's for sure.
And we should talk about this last wine too. I mean, this is a library release. We don't have much of this wine left, but the 2015 Wild Boar Petit Verdot is a wine that we love, and a varietal that, you know, in Virginia, people kind of know about Petit Verdot a little bit more than maybe say some other famous wine growing regions. But this is a varietal that it's obviously French. The literal translation of the name kind of petit, small or little. And Verdot, if you look at the root of that being vert, refers to green. And the literal translation would be little green one. And it's a reference to the fact of really two things, right? The most important one is that this is a very late ripening grape varietal. It is the last grape varietal to ripen in Bordeaux, France. So this is a varietal that really historically is most famous in Southwest France, but it's never really had sort of the the limelight. It's never been the star of the show. It's always been sort of an important blending component, and that really boiled down to its late ripening tendency. And so year in and year out, you might not get it right because of the marginal weather conditions of Bordeaux. So the berries always looked small and green because most of the growing season, regardless of the color of the fruit, the berries are small and green until really this last sort of period of time called veraison out in the vineyard, where the grapes kind of swell to their final state, and if it's a black skin grape varietal, it'll change from sort of green to black. And Petit Verdot does this last. It makes all of us rip our hair out here. It is the most stressful thing, but it seems to have really found a home here in Virginia, because this comes to the second reason for why it's the little green one. The berries do remain rather small. It produces the most inky sort of concentrated wine of all of the red Bordeaux grape varietals, so Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, because the berries are small and has very thick skin, meaning the ratio of all of the color, the flavor, the tannin that's found in those grape skins is in a much higher proportion relative to Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot when we talk about the juice or flesh that's inside here. And so when we're actually making the wine, it can produce a really concentrated varietal, and it's really produces a nice wine here in Virginia, where we're able to get the grape ripened relatively routinely, but it gives us something that's long been sought after here in Virginia, and that's a wine that is concentrated. It has great extraction on the color. The wine has a structure as well in terms of the acidity and tannin and color content to age well, and I think out here on the property, it's been one of the varietals that obviously you all have been sort of one of the most fond of, but obviously for us, it's a varietal that we think offers a ton of promise, and that's really why we created this Wild Boar Cellars Petit Verdot, and I think the wine's really kind of coming into its own.
Absolutely. All right, we've got
Tony.
some pretty good questions.
Good question.
Coming. Yeah, Tony. So, a truth about me is that I love Lambrusco. It is one of my most favorite wines. I live in Washington, D.C., and Pizzeria Paradiso is one of my favorite restaurants. Their pizza's nearly as good as Stone Tower's. And I always go and order this one pizza with their Lambrusco by the glass, and it's just the dream. We don't have any plans to make a sparkling red like that at this point, but you know what? Never say never. I think that is just such a fun wine. And these days, I mean, it's really, I think people have really fallen in love with our sparkling wine program, and that could definitely be a fun take that we could do. But we shall see. Time will tell. No plans as of yet, though.
Debbie asked a good question. Is Wild Boar a different label? And the short answer is yes. The longer answer is it is a label that we created when in our youthful stages for any wine that we make. I'm gonna wait just 1 second. We have a plane.
We're right by the Leesburg airport, so we get these really cute little planes that fly by.
And it is a cute little plane flying by.
It's a good
So
one.
anyways, the Wild Boar Cellars label it represents any wine that we make, but from fruit that is not 100% grown here on the property, meaning that we are working with other grape growers to get that fruit here, and then we're making the wine and aging the wine and bottling it and then releasing it here. And those wines, while they're not made from the property here, are always inspired by something that we're doing from the property, because we kind of pull back and think, who is Stone Tower Winery? Why do we exist? What is our goal? Our goal is really to just produce wines 100% from, see, we got another plane coming now. I don't know if you can hear it. Requires a lot of focus to be out here in the elements, but the estate label is really kind of what the future is out here, in the sense that like this Reserve Sauvignon Blanc, this is a wine that if you look at the label, it says grown, produced, and bottled by Stone Tower Winery, and for us to legally put that on the label, 100% of that has to be true. And you can go to a lot of different wineries, and maybe they have one label that's the name of their winery, and they bottle all of their wines underneath that. But we created this distinction really so that we could highlight when we produce these small production, high quality wines just from the estate. And then this Wild Boar Cellars label was always inspired by things that we're doing from the property, or that we're going to be doing from the property, but just the vineyards and maturity just isn't quite there yet, because while yes, we started planting vines in 2009 and we're over 10 years old from that standpoint, we're still relatively youthful in the long scheme of things. And so the Wild Boar Cellars label is kind of the label that allows for us to kind of get to where we want to be with the estate label. And it's really been kind of instrumental in kind of setting great benchmarks for ourselves to make sure that we can exceed that hopefully from the property, but at least get to highlight vineyards, producers, and wine growing regions that we're especially fond of.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, we had another great question kind of along those lines of what's in store from the estate this year. And I mean, we're just kind of right on the burgeoning edge of that, which is so exciting. We're, every week we're trying to do a little, bring you all out into the vineyards and talk about what we have going on here. And next week, for sure, we're definitely going to be talking about bud break. And that is really the kickstart to the growing season. And yeah, so hopefully we have a great vintage. I think we all deserve some good weather this year. So hopefully that turns out to be in store. And we will continue with our program. So we have quite a bit of new red wine, red vineyards coming online this year that we're hoping to produce some wine from. So that's really the new excitement, I would say. We'll continue producing on the white side of things, our Viognier, Chardonnay, a couple different Sauvignon Blancs. And then, but with the reds, we're able now with much more of our red vineyards mature enough that we'll be doing not only the Hogback and Hogback Mountain and Windswept Hill, which are our two real flagship Bordeaux style blends, but then also producing some single varietals. So, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, etc. From the vineyards here. So we're all really looking forward to that, getting into that level of detail with the project here. Yeah.
Beth, if you're still watching us, I'm sorry I didn't say hi to you when you first got in here. I didn't say hi to a lot of people, and I apologize to all of you all, but Beth, the CEO of Visit Loudon, does a tremendous job all throughout her tenure and the rest of her team out there at Visit Loudon, but especially over the last few weeks with how quickly things have evolved, the amount of support that she's given the hospitality and tourism industry that has been hit incredibly hard over the last few weeks. Her and her team have been working their tails off and doing just about everything to kind of help everyone out here in the industry, and we really appreciate that, Beth. So keep it on and let us know how we can help. Jenny, you asked a great question about Petit Verdot. Yes, it is in Bordeaux, but you typically find it on the left bank or the right bank of Bordeaux. And so, again, it's important to understand if you're not as familiar with Bordeaux, it's a big wine growing region. It's an incredibly famous wine growing region. But the quality red wines, again, which represent a fraction of the overall production of Bordeaux, historically have been divided into this left bank, right bank dichotomy, where on the right bank, based on the soils and kind of the climate over there, generally Cabernet Franc and Merlot reign supreme. You very rarely find Cabernet Sauvignon, although there are some pockets there. Virtually no Petit Verdot or Malbec or Carmenere over there. On the left bank, what limited Petit Verdot plantings still exist in Bordeaux will generally be found in the left bank, and specifically in the village like Pauillac, Saint-Julien, generally going to have most of your plantings. It's a really small area, but generally speaking, it's very, very hard to find a Bordeaux that has any Petit Verdot in it, and generally when you do, it's only about 3 to 4%, but it would be on like the left bank in the villages and communes of Pauillac and Saint-Julien.
Yeah. I think you have to say how you got started in wine. There you go.
We don't have enough time. We'll have our own virtual taste. No, I got started in wine because I was in graduate school and I was about a year and a half away from finishing up my PhD in political science. It doesn't really offer a lucrative financial return, neither does being a graduate student. And so I was always working in restaurants, and I really loved food. I was actually historically a really picky eater, but ended up, thanks to my wife Jillian, turning it around, and my sister Allison and my mom, they finally got me on the right path. And naturally, when I was in the restaurant industry, I got exposed to wine. Our GM of the restaurant left. The owners asked me if I wanted any additional responsibility, and I said, yeah, I'd take over the wine program. I think that'd be a lot of fun. And I didn't say it'd be a lot of fun. I said I'd really like to do that. I think I could really elevate things. I didn't really know anything about wine at that time, but I always saw the GM sitting down with the wine reps at like 2 p.m. on a Thursday or Friday drinking wine, and then would work through service. And I thought that was maybe a cool thing. And so, but then as I did that, since I didn't know much about wine, when I threw myself into the books, I absolutely loved it. I became fascinated with the subject. One thing led to another, where I then kind of took over as GM at that restaurant. You know, been studying through the quartermaster sommeliers for a while. Joined Stone Tower about 6.5 years ago, and just, it's one of those industries where the more you learn about it, the more you're in it, the more you drink and eat nice stuff, you just fall in love with it. But that's kind of the most concise version of that answer I can give.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I would love to talk about our Easter offerings, which we have a lot of fun stuff coming up for this coming week. So we will be doing a tasting on Saturday. So we'll have a tasting flight with 2 rosés. So one from our project in Burgundy, so the Maison Sanglier rosé, the Wild Boar rosé, and then we're doing the Pinot Noir and Nebbiolo.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
good. So we'll be talking through those in a similar format to this, and just really, discussing those wines and why they're so delicious with your spring lamb and that type of thing. And then we have delicious spring lamb and pork tenderloin and this amazing menu that Chef Stuart put together. So what we're doing for that is we're offering it, it's a menu price per person that you can pick up starting on Friday and Saturday. And we order as soon as possible so we can make sure that we have enough to cook and feed all of you with, but you can order anytime through, I believe, the end of the day on Friday. And then, great Easter feast, and so definitely check those out. And then we also have, so it's the main courses on that is the pork tenderloin and lamb, and then we also have a wild mushroom goat cheese tart, which sounds delicious. And so those are the main Easter offerings, along with 2 really great bottles of wine with that. So that would be the Nebbiolo.
And the 2018 Maison Sanglier Rosé, which is from our vines in Burgundy, France, just outside of the village of Pomard.
Yeah,
for
sure. And so
amazing wine.
Our next kind of virtual experience like this will be Thursday at 5. We'll be doing a tasting with our friends down at Early Mountain, which should be super fun. So we'll be tasting one of their Cabernet Francs and then a rosé from us. And just talking with Eileen, who is their director of marketing. She is awesome and just a total wealth of knowledge, really fascinating person. So that should be a really fun conversation. So we'll be doing that on Facebook Live at 5 o'clock on Thursday, and you can purchase those wines, including the Early Mountain wine, here, and come and pick that up. We're open daily, 11 to 6 for curbside pickup, so anytime you want to come and get those, just give us a ring or buy it on the website, and we can have that ready for you. So that's the main stuff for this week. So
suffice it to say, we really kind of want any way that we can sort of dominate your Easter weekend. We're willing to accept the pressure that we will make it unforgettable. I think
it should be fun.
I think so.
Stone Tower is usually always closed for Easter because it's just a really nice. I have a huge family, and we often will come here actually because we don't fit in anybody's house anymore, so we have to come to the winery. So it'll be 40 of us and hanging out and doing the big Easter egg hunt and all of that. Obviously, we're not doing that this year, and so we want to, yeah, just really, be able to do as much as we can for you to make it a fun day, and hopefully we'll have beautiful weather again next weekend and all that good stuff. But yeah, should be good.
Jake, I want to give you a shout out. We love La Diplomat, and we would love to be in touch with you. We would be flattered to have our wines anywhere remotely near your restaurant. We appreciate all your kind words, by the way, as we go through here. So we'll maybe we can reach out to you and send you a message. And especially during this really trying time, we'd love to know whatever you all are doing from a curbside standpoint or anything like that we can help in any way. Maybe we can work together on a local happy hour at some point down here over the remaining 2.5 months of this that we have. Glennis, we'll also reach out to you about a possible option for pescatarians for the Easter feast. We do have a vegetarian option. I'll chat with our chef to see if there's anything we can do from a fish standpoint as well. Chefs love it when I can ask them to make a special request, and we genuinely absolutely love that. That's not a joke.
And Glennis, you asked a wonderful question, which was this idea of Virginia being the bridge between the old and new world. And I absolutely agree with that. I mean, that's something where, I think the most poignant example for me that comes up is we went to the Decanter Fine Wine Experience in London this past November, and there we were the only Virginia winery, and we were stationed right between these amazing Bordeaux houses and then mostly Napa, and California wineries. And it was such a fun experience for us because pretty much all of these, English people were tasting Virginia wine for the first time, and people from all around the world really too. And it was so great for us to be especially in that spot within the room because we could give exactly that answer. It's a very succinct way and, not the full truth, but an easy way to pinpoint, this is we're geographically located in between, California and France, but then stylistically, I think fairly within those realms as well.
Yeah, very good point. Mm-hmm. Arif, thank you very much for tuning in and all the kind words that you gave us. Matt, thanks for checking in as well. Yeah. Good to see you. Bob and Teresa, thank you all very much for coming. Tony, what's a pescatarian?
Tough to say,
double fish?
This is
double fish. We really appreciate it. If you have questions that weren't answered, send us a message. We'd be happy to get back to you directly. We love connecting with you all. And as Lacey said, we really appreciate all the support you've given us. And we're having a blast, and we're having a ball. And we hope you all are too. Stay safe and well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Mm-hmm.